NASCAR is still having some sponsorship struggles, and things are getting so bad that now the FBI is breaking into people's homes. How's it going, everybody? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. We have a lot of little news stories to talk about today. They're all kind of off the track, kind of business related, so I think this will still be a pretty interesting episode. I'll start today's episode with something I heard Richard Childress say just a couple days ago. RCR's been all over the news lately, revealing Daytona 500 paint schemes, introducing the 8 car back to the Cup Series, and now regarding the team's future, Richard Childress said, "Don't be surprised if we see Tyler Reddick get some Cup Series starts this year." Tyler Reddick is running a full-time Xfinity Series schedule for RCR next year. Remember, just this last season, he won the Xfinity Championship driving for Junior Motorsports. He's jumped over to RCR for 2019, and now Richard Childress seems to be saying that he's going to get some Cup Series opportunities this year. Similar, I guess, to kind of what happened to Daniel Hemrick this year. You know, Hemrick was a full-time Xfinity driver for RCR, but he got a couple of Cup Series starts this last season. Looks like RCR is maybe doing the same thing for Tyler Reddick next year. But the thing I find interesting about this is, you know, with Daniel Hemrick, it was obvious. Make a couple of Cup Series starts, and then with Newman's contract expiring, he's going to jump into that car immediately, and that's what happened. That's kind of was predictable. With Tyler Reddick, you know, sure, give him some Cup Series starts, but RCR currently doesn't have any empty rides for 2020. Unless this means they're planning to open up a third team again and be a 3-car team over there, which would be great. That maybe is what this is hinting at. I don't want to read too much into it. It just looks like, you know, Tyler Reddick might get some Cup Series time next year. Straight from the boss's mouth, so I think it's a pretty legit rumor. Another small bit of team owner news, Rick Ware Racing announced just a couple days ago that they are expanding for next season. Small family-owned team, but they did reveal that they'll be adding a second full-time car to their Cup Series program after receiving race cars from Levine Family Racing and Front Row Motorsports. So while this last year they just had 1 car, this year they will have 2. So always nice to report when we have a team expanding in the Cup Series. That's always nice. Even if it's a small team that's really never going to be competitive. It's still good to see that we're going to have a 40-car field most weeks. Now, before I get into the FBI story I hinted at and some other weird things, I want to talk about one other bit of news, one more rumor that came out that I feel like nobody's talking about. Reports I've seen are suggesting that Boston Red Sox owner John Henry is interested in buying a partial stake into NASCAR. John Henry already owns the Red Sox, he owns Liverpool Football Club, and he also owns a stake in Roush Fenway Racing. So he's already got some ties to NASCAR, but now there are rumors that he wants to buy into NASCAR itself, or at least a partial stake. It's been a huge rumor since like before the summer that, you know, the France family is looking to possibly sell their stake in NASCAR. Now, this rumor about John Henry is probably the result of NASCAR, you know, making a $2 billion or nearly $2 billion bid to purchase International Speedway Corporation, ISC. NASCAR's been trying to buy them so that they can have more direct influence over the racetracks and therefore probably the schedule going forward. But also by buying that property, NASCAR is now more valuable. That could be why people like John Henry, who already has, you know, some ties to NASCAR with Roush Fenway, it's why people like him could be interested in buying into the series. It's good news that there's a billionaire out there that still wants to spend money on NASCAR, but I think NASCAR knows that they need to change their business model so that they're not just relying on these rich dudes funding their sport for years. It's kind of how it's been going for a little while now, but I think NASCAR knows that they gotta make some changes. That being said, it's good to know that somebody wants to invest. And I feel like nobody's been talking about that. I saw the report like 2 days ago. I thought about making a video about it then. I figured I'd save it for the weekend. Yeah, I just, you know, it's a good thing that someone wants to spend a lot of money on NASCAR. But of course, nobody wants to talk about the good news, except me. That's why I'm here. Now on to the little bit of weird news I hinted at the very, very beginning of this show. Yesterday, it was publicly announced that the FBI, the scary FBI, raided the home of Jeff Karpoff, who is the CEO of DC Solar. Apparently seizing documents, they also went over to the DC Solar's main offices and did the same thing, so big deal, FBI and DC Solar, the company, having some issue there, I don't know. One report I read says it has something to do with a tax dispute. It's just money, big money, I don't know the story there. But how does this all relate to NASCAR? You know, I'm not a business channel, I'm not a news channel. How does this news relate to cars going in circles? That's what we need to know. Well, it just so happens that DC Solar is one of Chip Ganassi Racing's biggest sponsorship partners. They signed on to sponsor the 42 car in their Xfinity Series next year for Ross Chastain. I couldn't find anywhere that said exactly how many races they're sponsoring Chastain for, but it makes it sound like they're sponsoring the majority of them, if not all. DC Solar's been the title sponsor of some races the last couple of years. That company has really invested heavily into NASCAR and individual race teams the last couple of years. So this could be big news for those teams especially, and possibly even for NASCAR. Now, obviously, this is the FBI, so a lot of it's kind of top secret. All the reports I read really didn't give any detail. I saw a statement from Chip Ganassi Racing Racing, though, regarding this whole matter. They simply said, although we have received little in the way of facts, we are aware of the situation with DC Solar and are monitoring it closely. So basically, they don't know anything, or if they do, they're of course not going to tell the public yet. But this is just weird. I don't know the full details of this whole issue between DC Solar and whatever shady business they possibly or allegedly have done. I don't know the deal there. All I know is this doesn't bode well for, their involvement in NASCAR going forward, which really sucks. Now, I hope this doesn't affect Ross Chastain's ability to drive that 42 car next year. I hope this means they're going to keep him in that car full time. I hope this means that they're going to continue to give him solid equipment and give him a chance to win the championship, because Ross Chastain right now is a top Final Four contender in the Xfinity Series. But if DC Solar, for whatever reason, has to drop out of NASCAR, isn't able to give them the funding that they need, then that, I don't know how contracts work. If DC Solar leaves, does Ross Chastain's contract become null and void? Like, is Chip Ganassi Racing legally allowed to just kick him out and restructure the deal? I don't know all that. But it feels like that's something that could end up being on the table if something really bad happens to DC Solar and they do have to leave NASCAR or go out of business or whatever they have to do. I hope that doesn't happen, but anytime you got the FBI involved, raiding people's houses, it's shady business. So we'll see how it affects NASCAR. Hopefully not too heavily. Hopefully it doesn't affect Ross Chastain directly. But we shall see. I can only speculate here, and I don't really want to do that. To close the show, I want to talk about some big picture stuff. Sometimes I'll go on Google, or I'll go through Twitter, or go through wherever, and I'll just type in NASCAR news. I'll be scrolling through my news feed, reading a bunch of major sports newspapers, read their top headlines about NASCAR. Sometimes I'll find reports from USA Today or New York Times, or in this case, I found an article from Forbes. Now, often these newspapers will, give me some good information or maybe, provide some insight and make me think about something a way I hadn't before. But oftentimes when they're talking about NASCAR, I find they'd be I feel like they fall short. And that's exactly how I felt reading this article from Forbes. Forbes, big magazine, big website, big news organization, big entity, big name. And it's really a shame that they're allowed to publish these types of things about NASCAR. I found this relatively short piece written by Dave Caldwell, and in it he writes that NASCAR is not making changes fast enough. That's basically the thesis statement of his little spiel here. It's that the current management of NASCAR, Jim France, Steve Phelps, they're not making changes quick enough. He talks about how in the old days of NASCAR with Bill France Sr., or, in the 80s, 90s, how, if they didn't like something, they'd make the change right then and there, and the fans loved him for it. In this snarky little read, the author mentions that NASCAR is not making any major changes to the schedule for next season, really no huge ones at all, and he acts like this is a bad thing, or he talks about how this is a bad thing. Which, sure, I agree with him there. We all want NASCAR to make changes. He mentions how he thinks Bill France Sr. would have for sure added a couple short track races next season. And this is where the author really loses me, because it's clear that this guy isn't in on main NASCAR news. Because if you've kept up with NASCAR news, you'd know that over the last several months and going forward into next year, NASCAR is making tons of huge changes. This all despite the fact that they are locked into a lot of long-term deals, which is where this author seems to completely forget about the fact that NASCAR can't make any changes to the schedule really until 2021. Legally, they cannot make these changes. But like I said, this author acts like the leadership of NASCAR is just complacently sitting by while, the ratings plummet, the attendance plummets. He acts like they're just okay with that, when if you paid attention to news, they're not, and they're obviously trying to change it. I mean, we've just talked about in this show about how NASCAR is trying to attain full ownership of ISC. Last year, they added a road course to the schedule. We didn't think it was possible for them to change the schedule, and yet they still somehow found a way to add one of the most entertaining tracks of the year to the schedule. They've overhauled the aero package for next year. We already know they're working on and developing a new business model for the title sponsorship going forward. Last year, we saw them try to limit what teams could spend, and many more changes like this. This just makes NASCAR look worse than it actually is. It's unnecessarily and unfairly tainting the public opinion of the sport even further. Negativity sells. It's obvious. We all know it. It's just a shame that we continue to see this type of thing around NASCAR, because it's not doing anyone any favors, and yeah, I just don't like it. Anyway, guys, I figured I'd just give that a mention because it's kind of just a pet peeve of mine. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed a lot of random news in today's episode, but hopefully you had a good time. It's the off-season. You kind of see that type of thing. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram to continue the conversation over there, or you can become a supporter of the show, like Michael Harrison at GWizofTheStars, SelfishGifts.com, Mentally Defective, Cameron James Ticemore, and the rest of these amazing supporters. We continue to add new ones every week, and it means so much to me that you're able to support the show directly and help me out directly. This really means a lot to me, so thank you all for taking the time to check out that link down below. Thanks as always for the support. We're nearing Christmas. I'm not sure when my next video will be. If there's a huge NASCAR bombshell news story that comes out in the next few days, you'll definitely hear from me the day of or the day after. But with Christmas coming around, if I don't have another video up by then, I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and I'll see you guys again very, very shortly. So stay tuned. Thanks, everyone.